Joining us now is Kristian Kolding. He joins us here in the studio. He's from Deloitte Access Economics and he's a partner. Now, we did see that rate cut last week, Kristian. Yes. The banks, Big Four at least, not passing them on in full. What kind of effect do you expect that cut to have?
The effect is likely to be muted relative to the effect of cutting rates from a higher basis point, but it still has an important effect on the economy from two other channels. One is the way that it supports asset prices, and we are starting to see that rate cuts are likely to be a supporter of the rising house prices coming through, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, of late. The other effect is on the Australian dollar. So the fact that they're cutting the interest rates also means that our dollar is lower than it otherwise would have been, particularly considering the relatively high terms of trade. Now, lower dollar means that our exporters are more competitive in the global market. It also means our import competing industries are more competitive here in the domestic market.
Okay. There is so much talk about retail at the moment as well, because that is a part of Australia at the moment that's really struggling. It's not heading in the way it should be. Would this make an impact on that at all?
It is likely to have some impact,
yeah.
Both because of that asset price effect. So as your house prices go up, people feel wealthier. That does mean you're more likely to spend than you would otherwise be.
Even though they've got a mortgage.
Even though they have a mortgage, you feel wealthier.
Right.
That encourages spending. There is also some effect coming through from the mortgage rate drops. So while the RBA cut rates by 25 basis points, the average drop came through from the Big Four banks was about 14 basis points. And that is better than nothing. It's not going to be a huge effect, but you do expect some effects.
Yeah. But I guess coming into Christmas, it's timely.
It is timely.
That might give a nice injection.
Yeah. And what's going to be really interesting about the week to come is that there's a few surveys coming up where they're looking at, and some of the banks are looking at, what is the consumer sentiment at the moment? And the interesting thing about these surveys relative to a lot of the ABS data is it's much more current. And so we get a better picture of what is the effect now of both the RBA cut last week, but also the cuts in the months beforehand, as well as that tax stimulus. So that's something that we're going to be looking at very closely is consumer sentiment starting to pick up, which is a good leading indicator for actual consumer spending thereafter.
Just on the tax stimulus, has it had the stimulatory effect? Josh Frydenberg says we still need to wait to see that effect in the coming months, but surely with the number of tax returns that have gone through, if people haven't spent that money now, they're not going to, are they?
Well, there are still, so you're right, and Josh Frydenberg is right to say we are yet to see how much of an effect this is going to have, because we haven't seen the full impact yet. But we do hope still that there's going to be some sort of effect coming over the next few months, particularly leading into Christmas, as you mentioned before, Peter.
Yeah, and then, well, quite possibly another rate cut in, February next year?
February next year, or even earlier. Some people are already starting to talk about a November cut, unless we start seeing really some good...
Where do you stand on that one?
I do think November seems a little bit early, but not out of the ballpark by any means.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
Another one.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly.
That'd be good for punters.
The famous Melbourne Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one of the biggest things with where the economy is at the moment, the underlying problem is the US-China trade war.
Yes.
How do you counter that? You can't. Australia's got to ride it out, and I guess we're in a pretty good position to be doing so. Some of our export markets are doing quite well out of that ongoing tension.
You're absolutely right, and something that gets missed sometimes is the fact that we have actually benefited to some degree from this trade war because commodity prices are higher. That benefits our exporters of iron ore in particular, which flows back into the federal budget. It's also a big reason why we're now seeing the federal budget being balanced. Another way to get through this period of uncertainty is to have nice, stable policy agenda and also to support the economy through that, some of the infrastructure spending that both the federal government and the state government is promising. It's in the pipeline. The question is how quickly can they get that out?
Okay.
All right.
Kristian, appreciate your time this morning.
My pleasure.
We'll see when the market's opened at 10 o'clock this morning. It's a public holiday in some states, obviously, but the market will still open. But we might see a lower volume of trade. Kristian, thank you.